Welcome to Galaxy Brains.
An infinite amount of cash.
I'm your host, Alex Thorn.
The U.S. banking system is sound and resilient.
Bitcoin made a new all-time high.
If you're not long, you're short.
Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet, all Bitcoin's going to be erased.
Bitcoin's the best crypto out there.
Bitcoin is going to zero.
Welcome back to Galaxy Brains. I'm your host, Alex Thorn, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy. I am in Austin, Texas for Consensus 2024. We've got an abbreviated episode today, so we're just talking with our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading about markets and macro and Mt. Gox and Gemini Earn and a variety of other topics. Before we get into that, I need to remind you to please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Before we get into it with Beimnet, though, I want to talk that the political situation in crypto continues to accelerate. I talked about this last week with the overwhelming majority of Congress voting in favor of the FIT21 Act, that comprehensive crypto market structure bill. 71 Democrats breaking with the White House to support that bill, including former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The Ethereum ETFs approved, 19B4s last Thursday approved. So now we're just waiting for the vehicles themselves to get their S1s in order so they can go effective. I don't know, could take as long as August. Eric Balchunas last week on our podcast said that he thought it could be as soon as 2 weeks from now. We just don't know. But again, over the weekend, addressing the Libertarian Party's national convention, former President Donald Trump said, well, actually, let's roll the clip and hear what he said on Saturday night. Phineas, roll that clip.
I will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in the USA, not driven overseas. I will support the right to self-custody to the nation's 50 million crypto holders. I say this with your vote. I will keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons away from your Bitcoin. And I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency.
So now the former president very explicitly at this point, a couple weeks ago at Mar-a-Lago, he said that if you like crypto, that you should vote Trump. But now he is explicitly saying he will protect your right to self-custody. He will keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons, quote unquote, off your Bitcoin. This is an explicit campaign now seeking crypto voters in the United States by the former president. He also, by the way, said during that speech that on day one, he would commute the sentence of Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht. Also a huge nod to the libertarian sort of wing of the country. I mean, the Libertarian Party itself cheered raucously at both the Ross Ulbricht promise and the Bitcoin promise. But of course now, I mean, these are sort of, those are triggers for a big part of the cryptocurrency world. Our listeners may recall, we interviewed Chris Tarbell, former FBI agent who actually helped lock up Ross Ulbricht sometime in maybe the spring of 2022. We interviewed him, 23. So last year, that was a fascinating interview. So go back and check that out. But in general, Trump clearly leaning into the crypto issues, and it only is accelerating. And I don't know. It's going to get weirder, I think. I mean, politics is always strange. Politics makes strange bedfellows, is the old saying. And apparently the former president thinks that, talking directly to the America's cryptocurrency holders and owners and Bitcoiners is potentially a winning strategy. It'll be interesting to see if Democrats, a lot of them broke ranks to vote for this crypto market structure bill, SAB 121. The president has still not vetoed it. I think he probably has a few more days after this podcast comes out. Maybe he won't veto it. Maybe he'll just let it, be overturned. If he doesn't veto, then it will become law anyway. The overturning of SAB 121. Lots of moving pieces here. Crypto clearly on the national political scene. Again, no special guest on this week's episode, just because traveling here in Austin. Consensus is just about to get started. I'll be speaking live on Friday at the main stage about what drives crypto prices. I better figure out what drives those prices before I go on stage. But we do have a conversation with Beimnet to share you, and let's hop right in. Let's go now to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, Beimnet, welcome to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
Wow. The president of the United States over the weekend, former president, I should say, said I will protect your right to self-custody, and a bunch of other pro Bitcoin and crypto stuff. It's an acceleration even from last week when we talked the political fervor. And after we recorded, we knew this was going to happen, but also the SEC has approved the Ether ETFs. So now we just wait for one of them to launch. What's your impression week over week?
I think it's a notable shift in terms of the political landscape for crypto. In addition to the Trump comments, you've had some developments in Congress and the Senate as well that are reasonably constructive for crypto. I just think more and more folks are just waking up to the fact that there are 50 million crypto holders that potentially vote, and there's a lot of single issue voters out there. And so I think that the political sort of landscape is recognizing, that this is going to be a tight election and you need to win every vote. And a guy like Trump is going to do everything he can to get elected. And so, I think no matter what party wins, it kind of seems like crypto is going to end up winning because folks are waking up to the fact that it's a real issue. And that's, manifested itself in this 180, kind of flip on the ETH ETF, which, definitely seems politically motivated to me. And so, I think you've got a setup here where the barriers in terms of regulatory barriers are kind of seeming like that they're falling in a number of different areas. And so this past week has made me more long-term constructive on crypto for sure. And I think, prices might not be reacting to it at the moment, but, 6 months down the line, a couple of years down the line, I think these are some of the more constructive developments we've had all year.
I agree. And let's talk macro. I saw there was a treasury auction a few minutes ago. We're recording here on May 29th, Wednesday. Looks like it was, pretty weak interest. You were watching that, right? What's your take on the fixed income side at the moment?
Well, the domestic fixed income story is very interesting right now, but I think abroad is even more interesting. Just in the span of the last 48 hours, you hear the kind of fixed income developments that are notable. You had some comments from BOJ officials saying that the BOJ might need to be less aggressive with bond buying in terms of how they're reacting to their currency. They might need to focus more on monetary policy. So you've had a very dramatic shift in the JGB curve. 10-year JGBs are through 1%. You also had a hot Australian CPI print. It was came in at like 3.7% annual, 3.6% annualized versus like a 3.4 annualized expected for the month of April. And then right after that, you had a German CPI print that came in hot. And then yesterday you had the 2-year and the 5-year auctions go poorly as well. You also had Kashkari comments that suggested that hikes are, even though he's the most hawkish member or one of the most hawkish members, he was saying that rate hikes are certainly not off the table for the Fed. And so, you've just had this string of like really hot data across the board. And it's led to a very dramatic, sell-off in global fixed income. Like the UK curve has sold off pretty dramatically. Another like 10 basis points in the long end today alone, and that's also on the back of hotter data. And so you are really starting to see this, it's the inflation narrative, but it's also just that higher for longer means that these long end bonds are totally mispriced. And so you're having a pretty material shift in global fixed income curves, and ultimately that has a transmission mechanism into broader risk. And so I'm a little bit more cautious on U.S. equities here, given that these moves in fixed income have been pretty aggressive, and on top of that, you've got very notable data points coming out over the next 2 weeks. PCE on Friday, and you've got non-farm payrolls the week after. And so if those two data points are hot, I'm getting very nervous for broader risk. But long story short, bonds are kind of breaking down everywhere, in G10 at least, and that's generally not good. And ultimately, to tie this back together with Bitcoin, there was an announcement yesterday that, BlackRock is adding Bitcoin to some of its fixed income funds. It might be a small proportion of, the assets in the BlackRock funds, but conceptually, the idea that Bitcoin belongs in a fixed income sort of portfolio toolkit is really important to understand, because US bonds being the kind of risk-free asset of the world, right? Like, when folks feel the need to have some kind of hedge versus essentially the risk-free product in the world, I think that's very telling. And I've always wanted to write something to every big bond manager in the world, being like, guys, like, have you heard of Bitcoin? Like, this seems like something good to have to protect against just massive runaway inflation and a huge bond portfolio. So it's a really interesting setup. And if things break, the answer is always going to be print more money, and that's generally bullish Bitcoin. And so I think the worse macro gets, the more compelled I get to own Bitcoin, because I know that the only answer to like stopping the back end from going is really more aggressive monetary policy, and that should I think in theory at least support an asset like Bitcoin and things like gold and silver.
It still remains a very tricky environment, right? Can't print if inflation's too high, but inflation's sticky, so you can't sort of back out of it. And meanwhile, the debt with the rates high, our government debt becomes unsustainable, and so it's the same story. But it is tricky. What I'm hearing from you is that it's still looking kind of bleak out there, the data, and so the pivot is not upon us yet. It sounds like. Let's us pivot. I want to ask you about another event that has been happening in the crypto and Bitcoin world. I guess we'll say two. Gemini Earn going to distribute in kind. We actually sent a note to
$2.1 billion, right, or something,
and
like
a long tail of in kind cryptos. I don't know how they
Yep.
recovered. Really like 50 or so. We sent a note to our clients and counterparties about this a couple weeks ago. But so you have that, which is very positive news, and it's imminent apparently. But also you had the Mt. Gox trustee effective moving the totality of their Bitcoin on chain, 141,000 Bitcoin, apparently not imminent to be distributed, some kind of wallet consolidation. That we were all looking at that a day or two ago. That was that was Monday night.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, the overhang of government coins, Gox coins, bankruptcy coins. Are we nearing the end? And also, does the market care? I'd say Bitcoin was down slightly in reaction to these moves, but not dramatic. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we already had the biggest individual supply event of the year, with kind of GBTC being unlocked, and I guess tens of billions of outflows from GBTC cumulatively.
Like 300,000 coins ish.
Right. And so the market has already shown a very strong capacity to absorb a lot of this supply. In addition, as your report highlights, that there's a ton of folks that aren't going to sell this Bitcoin, and so I'm pretty confident that the market can absorb most of this supply, if it's actually even going to be sold fairly comfortably. But again, I'm getting very cautious on kind of broader risk markets here with the bond moves that we're having. And so, to the extent that NASDAQ goes down 3-4%, which is an unlikely scenario, if you look at vols or how we've been trading, Bitcoin's certainly not going to trade well in that environment. So I'm definitely keeping a close eye on the macro side of things. But independent of that, I do think that Bitcoin is able to kind of absorb some of the supply. The more concerning supplies is further out the risk spectrum, in the sense that you do have consistent token inflation. You've got unlocks in a bunch of alts. And so there's a lot of supply that is coming on board for stuff that's a bit further out the risk spectrum. And then another notable point of supply is also ETH. Pending S1 approvals. Let's say that's maybe it gets dragged out to August, but that's $11 billion of ETH that can get redeemed, and so that's a little bit worrisome, and not really sure how to guesstimate or forecast how much of that is going to get outright sold versus rotated back into the ETH or the broader ecosystem. So these things are going to kind of limit the upside of crypto. So I am cautious, and particularly given the macro backdrop in fixed income, I do think that positioning should kind of lean a little bit more neutral.
Yeah, that makes sense. And hey, I guess we got to get through these supply overhang issues, whether it was GBDC or ETH or Gox coins, Gemini coins, government coins, Silk Road coins. Eventually we will get through them, though. So I agree. It feels near-term caution in the face of those, but it sounds like what you're saying too is sure those are there, but really macro is the real
I mean, think about this asset class that survived a regulatory onslaught, tons of crypto companies going bankrupt. I mean, it is an industry and an asset that has been attacked from basically every single possible vector. And so, is this the final boss? Probably.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. But getting through this stretch of, supply is kind of, one of the last big hurdles for crypto. And then, I'm not going to lie. I think that the amount of FOMO investors will get if you break to new all-time highs is going to be pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that, technically on a break of, call it 72 to 74K, if you do see firm acceptance of that price level, I think we'll reaccelerate higher. And, to be honest, I do anticipate that happening at some point this year.
All right, there it is. My friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, thanks for coming on Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this week's episode of Galaxy Brains. Thanks to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always, for joining. I'm here in Austin, like I said, abbreviated episode. Everybody have a safe and happy weekend, and we will catch you next week. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXY Research. See you next week.